Just then, a low sound echoed through the house, a raspy whisper that slithered into their ears. The laughter within them dulled, smothered by an icy dread that made it tough to breathe. "Did you hear that?" Fiora's voice trembled, excitement cloaked with fear. Yes, I thought it was the wind." Charlie laughed nervously, searching for reassurance but finding only anxious glances. "Not the wind," said Quinn, his voice steady yet incredulous. "Wind doesn't sound like a child giggling." Fiora shivered, eyes darting from one face to another, seeking comfort yet haunted by dread. "What if it is? What if it's luring us? Or maybe it needs something? We could try talking to it," Alex suggested, desperation edging into his voice. "Talking to a spirit didn't go so well in the last movie I watched, Alex," Sarah muttered. Quinn stepped closer to Fiora, a protective instinct shining through his bravado. "Let's move to the main room. Stay alert, it might just be playing with us." As they scooted closer together, Quinlan felt the warmth of Fiora beside him. Amidst the chaos brewing, he prioritized the bond they shared, a flicker of connection in the growing darkness. "Come on," Quinlan urged softly. "Whatever we do it together." The palpable tension hung in the air, the promise of uncertainty solidifying into a terrifying wall they had to face. Fiora's heart raced as she nodded, gratitude for his unwavering presence flowing silently between them. They were not just fighting for survival, they were unearthing truths deeper than mere existence. The shadows danced, and the echo of dread swept over them, but the lingering desire to uncover their fate bonded them tighter than the nightmares, leaving them tangled in a web of fear and resolve. Scene 32. Whispers of Betrayal. The air hung thick with anticipation and unspoken fears as moonlight trickled through the cracked windows of the decrepit cabin. The soft creaking of wooden boards beneath their feet echoed the growing tension in the room. Quinlan Vex stood near the hearth, its dying embers casting flickering shadows against the walls, illuminating the worn faces of their group. The weight of their decisions, their ghostly awakenings, felt palpable. "Do you feel that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening. His fingers drummed anxiously against his thigh, betraying the resolve he fought to maintain. Above the ghost stories adorned with laughter, now loomed a darker whisper. Fiora Lise shifted beside him, her bright energy dimmed as she caught his eyes. "What if it's not just the ghost?" she murmured, her determination faltering. "What if one of us? Don't say it." Quinlan interrupted, his heart beat a frantic drum in his chest. The unresolved horror of loss gnawed at the corners of his mind, shrouding him in a cold sweat. He turned sharply, scanning the worried faces of their friends. Maddie, her brows furrowed, clutched a locket, her gaze fixed on the ground. Avery instinctively moved closer to her, their shared vulnerability weaving a complex bond stronger than the fear that threatened to tear them apart. "I'm not saying it's true," Fiora continued, her voice a mixture of urgency and trepidation. "But I keep thinking." Before she could finish, Pedro, the self-appointed comic relief, burst into the strained atmosphere with a touch of bravado. "Hey, let's not go all whodunit on each other. I mean, who wouldn't want to kill me? I'm a total charmer." His forced chuckle rang hollow, but it drew a reluctant smile from Maddie, breaking the tension, if only momentarily. "Charming, sure, but you're still on my suspect list," Avery joked, his trademark wit infused with the dark levity they all desperately needed. Yet it didn't mask the unease wrapping them tighter like a suffocating blanket. "Can we focus?" Fiora demanded, her eyes flashing like daggers. "Everything we've done has led us here. We can't turn on each other. We need unity." Her voice quaked but remained fierce, her heart pounding for the safety of her friends. "Isn't that exactly what the entity wants?" Maddie chimed in quietly, the weight of danger pressing heavily on her shoulders. "To see us crumble." Quinlan's mind raced, piecing together the fears spreading among them, each thought darker than the last. "Let's just get through the night, okay?" he replied, tone laced with a mix of pain and resolve. But he knew it wasn't just the threat of the supernatural that was tearing them apart. It was the suspicion that had wormed its way into their hearts. Outside, a shadow danced in the periphery, momentarily breaking his internal whirlwind. Quinlan's fingertips tingled as he recalled the last time they felt free back when their laughter was genuine, before secrets darkened their camaraderie. "All right, enough of this." Fiora broke the somber atmosphere, her energy reignited, though it fell short of its usual brightness. Why don't we tell some of those ridiculous ghost stories? You know, the ones that make us forget what's out there? What? Pedro's eyebrows shot up. And possibly attract more ghosts? Brilliant thinking, Fiora. He caught her eye, their playful dynamic a flicker of comfort. Just trying to lighten the mood. She shot back, rolling her eyes, but the faint smile on her lips contained an ungrasped solace. Let me start, Avery said, the ghost of a smile on his face, yet his eyes mirrored the conflict within. You all remember the creepy tales about the old mill, right? Where the miller supposedly, as he launched into the tale, unraveling a story about betrayal and unfinished business, Quinlan's mind wandered, gradually latching onto the invisible threads of deceit that intertwined them. Pale moonlight cast shadows, and every unfocused gaze whispered unseen secrets. Yet in that moment, even with laughter echoing against the cabin walls, the unshakable truth hung heavy. They were all haunted, each by personal specters, while a collective fear weighed upon them heavier than the darkness outside. And somewhere in the silence between stories, beneath the hollow laughter, a betrayal wove itself into the fabric of their friendship, as palpable as the lingering chill creeping upon them. What if it's not just an old ghost story? Fiora finally murmured, raising doubts and pushing the boundaries of fear ever further. Scene 33. Splintered decisions. The heavy atmosphere crackled like static in the air, each word spoken weaving cracks in the fragile bonds of the group. Quinlan leaned against the weathered wooden table, his brow furrowed. Do we even know how to stop it? His voice, usually a soothing melody, trembled slightly. Fiora turned from the flickering candlelight, her eyes glistening with reflection. We could try reasoning with it. Her voice rose, buoyed by a mixture of hope and disbelief, but the room fell into an almost suffocating silence, the shadows in the corners seeming to swallow her words whole. It's a ghost, Fiora, Cade interjected, his tone more curt than intended. Fine droplets of sweat collected at his temples. Reasoning isn't exactly their forte. Please, do you really think yelling at it will help? Amelia chimed in, a wry smile lingering on her lips. The scoffing eased some tension, but soon collapsed under the weight of grim acknowledgement. Quinlan clenched his fists, the creaking wood beneath him echoing his unease. Then what do? Hide? Wait for it to decide which of us it wants to kill next. A pause hung, heavy like the air in the room. Isla shifted in her seat, glancing around at the others, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her empty mug. Maybe we should just go, she suggested softly, almost a whisper. Leave this place. We can't be trapped here forever. What? And abandon everything we love? Fiora snapped, her voice echoing the hurt coursing through her. The desperation for connection was clear in her tone, a plea hidden beneath surfaces too strained to hold smiles. The room descended into another thick silence. The tension grew so palpable that they could almost hear the entity's breath along with their own, an unseen presence just outside their fragile barricade of comfort. Quinlan, Cade turned, piercingly earnest. What are we waiting for? We can't just sit here. We need a plan. Quinlan opened his mouth to respond, but before he could give voice to his swirling thoughts, Fiora reached over, brushing her fingers against his. If we choose to fight, we should trust each other, she said, her tone softer, yet laden with seriousness. What if we make it angry? What if it feeds off our fear? In that charged moment, the unspoken bond between them pulsed with potential, but the urgency of survival loomed like a specter waiting to pounce. More silence enveloped the space, stretching beyond comfort, as emotions worked their way to the surface. Then from the back, amidst the tension, Oliver broke into a laugh. You're all acting like we're at a dinner party discussing the menu. We're being haunted for crying out loud. His laughter was buoyant, but only slightly masked his worry. His infectious, carefree attitude edged the specter back, even if just for a moment. Oliver, this isn't a joke, Fiora exclaimed, but with an unmistakable smirk tugging at her lips, the seriousness diffusing slightly. The others chuckled reluctantly. Williams shook his head, exasperated, yet a hint of mirth flickered in his eyes. Yeah, save the ghost hunting for the amusement park, Oliver. Yet the laughter faded quickly, dark clouds creeping back in. You don't get it. Cade raised his voice, hands slamming on the table, rattling the dishes. We can't afford to squabble. Not now. We either fight as one or we become its playthings. His breath hitched from anger and fear, colored by an unsettling reality that hung over them all. All right, fine. Then let's agree on a method, Quinlan said, exhaling heavily as he leaned back, his voice now lower but firm, nudging out light-hearted argument for more serious dialogue. We gather anything, salt, herbs, whatever can keep it at bay. We prepare a defense. But if that doesn't work? Isla's question lingered in the air, and a collective dread washed over them, the unyielding grip of reality gripping tightly. Then we run, Quinlan said resolutely, looking everyone in the eye, his expression hardening. If it comes to that, we fight for our lives. The determination ignited an electricity in the air, frightening, fervent, and undeniably alive. Fiora let it unfold, every heartbeat syncing with unspoken vows. Together, for as long as we can. As gratitude flickered between her and Quinlan, hope confronted despair in a fierce dance. The bond intertwined deeper, more than mere survival, a promise inked in fear and resilience, waiting for light against an encroaching darkness. What's our first move, then? Cade asked, the gravity in his voice steady amidst lingering uncertainty. Hold that thought, Quinlan responded, a flicker of confidence dancing in his voice. The game had begun, but their numbers were dwindling, and with each second lost in indecision, the shadows grew deeper. The question loomed, hanging in the air with a crushing intensity. What price would they pay for survival? Scene 34, the final watch. The campfire crackled softly, sparks spiraling into the oppressive night. A curious moon hung overhead, lending a ghostly glow to the group huddled close together. The shadows danced like whispering phantoms against the thick trees surrounding them. Fiora tugged her jacket tighter, her warm breath rising in quick bursts into the chill, signaling the unease that had seeped deep into their bones. "Do you think it's watching us right now?" Tyler asked, a fidgety edge to his voice. His eyes darted towards the inky blackness beyond the flickering light, a shiver running through him. "I'd hope it's too busy plotting our doom to watch us," Mira replied, sarcasm sharp yet shaky. As she leaned against the log, her posture prepared for flight, but at the same time an attempt to appear casual. Quinlan, seated next to Fiora, fixed his gaze on the embers. "We shouldn't let fear take the wheel. It's not just any entity. It's an ancient, vengeful spirit," Jason interrupted. "We get it, but that doesn't make it any less terrifying." He clenched his jaw, determination staining his voice with stubborn defiance. Fiora shifted closer to Quinlan, the warmth between them palpable. "What are we going to do if it comes for us again?" Her eyes searched his, desperation mingling with the glow of the fire, illuminating both hope and uncertainty. "Stick together," Quinlan said firmly, his playful demeanor momentarily stripped away. "If we find a way to communicate with it." "Communicate?" Mira scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Like it's going to sit down for tea?" A brief silence enveloped them as humor chased away tension, then Tyler broke it. "What if we just start yelling? Maybe it'll get confused and leave us alone." Laughter erupted, cutting through some of the overwhelming anxiety, though it faded quickly. As they exchanged fleeting smiles, the night pulsed with an unseen energy, suddenly darkening. The air grew heavy, filled with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, unsettling. Quinlan's heart raced, picking up on the shift before anyone else. "Everyone, look out!" A voice echoed sharply, pulling them from the moment. It was Brianna, her wide eyes reflecting the firelight like a startled deer. She pointed towards the tree line, her voice low, tinged with fear. "I think it's coming." Fiora's grip tightened around Quinlan's arm, their fingers intertwining as if becoming a single entity, a fortress against the oncoming dread. "Maybe it just wants to play," joked Lara, glancing nervously, attempting to weave laughter into the growing tension. But her laughter held no mirth, just brittle hope painted over fear. "Or it's just waiting to pick us off one by one," Jason snapped, trying to hold what little bravado remained. "We need an actual plan." The intensity of his voice cut through the air, suffocating the laughter. "Do you really think shouting is going to help?" Tyler interjected, frustration sparking anew. "Here's an idea. Let's not provoke it." "Provoking it? It's already provoked." Jason snapped back, heat rising in the atmosphere, their breath mingling in the frigid air. Anger surged like the crackling fire, lapping at their resolution. "Enough." Fiora's voice pierced the tension. a calm that belied the storm brewing beneath. She turned to Quinlan, seeking reassurance as her vulnerability laid bare. Their eyes locked sparks of fear and undeniable trust. Time seemed to slow as their world narrowed to just them. "I don't want to lose anyone else," Fiora whispered, her voice barely reaching above the crackle of the fire. "I won't let that happen." Quinlan's tone was fierce, a promise born from deep wells of emotions. He leaned closer, almost instinctively tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his thumb brushing against her cheek, a fleeting moment that transported them, erasing the terror around. But then came a rustle, breaking the spell. The group froze like deer at the sound, instincts pulling them taut. The shadows shifted, a figure emerging with a glinting gaze and an air of malevolence. "Believe me or not," Quinlan murmured to Fiora, the terror wrestling with his own denial as he gripped her hand tighter. "This may be our last chance to fight." The silence thickened like fog, wrapping around them as uncertainty hung heavy in the air. The laughter that had once warmed their hearts now felt impossibly far away, replaced by a shared reckoning of survival. Scene 35. Unexpected Sacrifice. The wind howled outside, the chill seeping through the old wooden walls of the cabin like uninvited guests. Inside, a single flickering lantern cast anxious shadows, dancing across the faces of the 9 friends huddled together. Quinlan Vex stood by the window, peering into the abyss of night, watching the trees sway in a frenzied rhythm as if caught in a macabre waltz. His jaw was clenched, and sweat dripped from his brow, purling like the weight of the world. "Has anyone heard from Fiora?" he murmured, a spark of worry igniting his usually light demeanor. The rest of the group fell silent, eyes darting towards the door, hoping she would burst in, alive and laughing, as she always did. In the corner, Leo, a lanky figure with glasses slipping down nose, shuffled nervously. "I think she went to check on that, the thing outside." He coughed, avoiding Quinlan's intense gaze. "You know, the entity?" A palpable tension suffocated the air, almost thick enough to cut. Isabel, her auburn curls cascading like a wild halo, rubbed her arms, trying to ward off the uncanny chill. "We can't just sit here. We need to find her." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her terror. What emerged next was fueled by underlying despair and camaraderie, an agreement swelling among the group, some whispering resolutely to each other, others shouting for action. The cacophony washed over Quinlan like a heavy tide. He felt panic creeping in, cold fingers clawing at his throat. Then, Fiora stormed in, her face aglow with triumph, yet streaked with dirt and fright. "Guys, I found something," she gasped, holding a crumbled piece of parchment. The room hung in a delicate balance between relief and fear. "What is it?" Bianca asked, leaning in closer, her dark eyes wide. "It's a warning, or maybe a ritual. Something about," her breath quickened, the words stuck like glue. "Something about appeasing the entity." A palpable unease settled, trapping them like moths caught in a web. Silver-haired Bart, the resident skeptic, crossed his arms tightly, eyebrow raised. "Are you sure this isn't just some?" Before he could finish, the room shuddered with a spine-tingling growl reverberating from the surrounding woods. "We don't have time for this," Quinlan ground out, pacing. "We need to leave, but we can't just abandon Fiora." Her gaze met his with an intensity that seemed to stretch the very fabric of the air between them. "Quinlan," she whispered, "we can't let it win. We have to fight." The others cast glances at each other, absorbing every unsaid word. The moment quivered with uncharted weight, a collective understanding sharing the same heartbreaking clarity. Not everyone would make it out alive. Bart swayed, anxiety thrumming visibly through him. "We can't just charge into the darkness blindly. We need to think." The sound of splintering wood echoed ominously, and a slow, almost horrid creaking twisted through the air, threatening their discussions. Tiernan, an enthusiastic storyteller with a penchant for ghost tales, straightened and gulped. "What if?" His voice dripped with both menace and hope. "What if one of us stays behind to distract it, to give everyone else a chance?" The idea hung thick like fog. More shadows loomed from the trees, creeping closer, their voices, their collective breath, a haunting reminder of the unseen terror gathering strength. Quinlan shook his head, desperation clawing at his heart. "No way. I won't let anyone sacrifice themselves." But Tiernan stepped forward, a quiet fire sparking in his hazel eyes. "But if there's a chance, Quinlan, What does it mean if we all die here without trying? The words pierced the air, weighted with an undeniable truth. Fiora stepped closer to Tiernan, her expression caught between admiration and anguish. It shouldn't be you, not you. But fate seemed to swirl around them, gathering strength in the essence of the forest. As the group began to agree upon a plan, Quinlan felt the floor tremble, vibrating under the gathering dread. "We can't waste time," Tiernan insisted, his bravado wavering. I'm good at distractions. Just go. Trust me." Quinlan clenched his fists, the inevitable gnawing at his insides. "No, I won't stand for this." But as the shadows morphed into sinister forms, blurring the line of reality, Tiernan took a step back and gripped the lantern fiercely. "I believe in you. Just go, Quinlan." A silent scream erupted within Quinlan, but before he could argue, Tiernan turned, rushing into the waiting night, the lantern's flame flickering and fading like the fleeting remnants of their bond. Fiora's voice broke, a knife slicing through the mounting darkness. "We can't let this happen. We have to save him," Quinlan shouted, his heart racing, the outside terror now echoing louder. But the door swung shut, sealing their fate. Whoever had been there, in a sacrifice so profound, knew what needed to be done as shadows crept predictably closer. A whisper from Fiora lingered like a mantra in the strangling silence. "Keep moving, for all of us." Scene 36, New Determination. The heavy, suffocating air wrapped around the remnants of their group like a funeral shroud. The forest stood silent and oppressive, a mile of thick trees and creeping shadows that loomed as the sun dipped below the horizon, implying a darkness that felt far more daunting than night. Each breath Quinlan took was shaky, each inhalation drenched in grief. He could still hear the echoes of laughter from their last moments of innocence and the sudden crash of despair that followed, the sound of a friend lost to a power they had naively awakened. "Guys, we need to regroup," Fiora said, her voice trembling yet firm. She stood at the ragged edge of their makeshift campsite, the flicker of a dying campfire painting her features in shades of orange and gray. Her hands wrung together as if seeking comfort in their warmth. As Quinlan scanned the rest of the group, Isaac, struggling to hold back tears, Lena, her eyes wide with unresolved fear, and Oliver pacing back and forth like a caged animal. A rigid tension hung in the air. "We can't just sit here waiting for it to come for us," he finally replied, the weight of his words slicing through their silent despair. "Do we even have a plan?" Isaac murmured, his brow furrowed as he shifted his gaze from the woods to Quinlan. "What are we supposed to do? Talk it down over coffee?" Lena snorted softly, unable to help the irony in her remark. "Guess it didn't like our last ghost story," she chimed, offering a weak smile that faltered under the gravity of their circumstances. Quinlan felt a tug at his chest, her attempt to lighten the mood amidst shadows that danced around them. But no amount of humor could mask the creeping dread. Caught in a swirl of conflicting feelings, Fiora stepped forward, the fire reflecting in her eyes, fire as fierce as any spell they'd ever spouted in jest. "We need to connect with the energy of the place," she said, certainty slowly emerging in her voice. "Like the legends. We can't fight it with whatever weapons we brought. We need to reason with it. There has to be another way." "Or a way to summon something else," Oliver offered, his eyes flickering with ambition. "What about that witch spell we read back at the inn? The one that supposedly calls good spirits for help? Or encourages the wrong type of attention?" Lena retorted, shaking her head. "I don't think we want to summon anything else into this mess." "Just a thought," Oliver shrugged, defensiveness creeping in his posture. "But honestly, wouldn't it be better to have a spirit on our side, rather than be picking off the last of us one by one?" With their fates hanging in a fragile balance, Quinlan caught Fiora's gaze, sensing an unspoken connection forming between them, as if the horror they faced had ignited something deeper in their essence. Uncertainty loomed, but there was resolve dawning in her eyes. It entwined with the raw ache still festering in his chest. Loyalty had always bound them together, yet somehow the stakes had shifted. Beneath the flickering light, Quinlan took a step toward Fiora, the distance between them inexplicably pulling tighter. "Whatever it is, we fight together," he promised, the air between them thickening with anticipation. "We'll face this, all of us." Fiora stepped closer, her breath warm as it ghosted across his cheek, igniting a current of steely determination in him. Yes, she whispered, the urgency of their grim predicament seeming to vibrate between them. Together. Then, in a moment both electrifying and desperate, Quinlan leaned forward, their lips nearly brushing. The distance vanished in a whirlwind of shared fear and passion, a connection rising fiercely among the chaos. It was a reminder of what they were fighting for. The kiss was swift, an urgent spark igniting before the shadows consumed it, fading into a moment of sober clarity that grounded them both. As they pulled apart, a heavy sky stared back at them, the weight of their fragile unity pressed down like a dark storm cloud that threatened to unleash its fury. "We will find a way," Quinlan stated, his voice echoing against the encroaching darkness, steeling himself for the battle ahead. "Even if it takes everything we've got." And even as the shadows thickened around them, it was this very determination that shot into the night like an arrow aimed straight toward the heart of impending doom. Scene 37. Confronting guilt together. The air was thick with tension, the faint sound of crackling leaves beneath their feet echoing the deeper pulse of silence that enveloped them. Quinlan leaned against the ancient oak, its gnarled limbs twisting against the darkening sky. They had escaped into the woods, away from the jagged remnants of their haunted sanctuary, but the shadows lingered like phantoms clawing for attention. Fiora stood a few paces away, her breath visible in the cool air, eyes darting toward the tree line where movement flickered at the edge of her vision. "You can't keep running from this, Quinn," she said finally, her voice steady but edged with trepidation. He clenched his jaw, a nervous habit he had honed. "I'm not running." The words felt heavy on his tongue, each one a lie cloaked in the weight of an unvoiced confession. "Just giving us space." "Space," Fiora echoed, her voice sharper now. The forest around them was eerily still, as if it, too, awaited the resolution of their unsaid words. "Because I don't want to." He stopped mid-sentence, catching himself before he tumbled into emotions he knew would pull him under. Instead, he threw a glance back at the clearing where their friends were, still unaware of the storm brewing between them. "Don't want to what?" She stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking yet thickening with unsaid guilt. "Deal with it? Pretend we're fine?" "Maybe I can't be fine with all this," he admitted, the vulnerability slipping through the cracks of his carefully guarded demeanor. The memories haunted him, not just of that night, but of the laughter they had shared, the dreams they had woven together under the stars. There was a flicker of recognition on her face, pain, acceptance, maybe even understanding. "You think I'm okay? You think it doesn't hurt to remember? But we can't keep pretending." A shout from the direction of their friends shattered their moment. "Quinn! Fiora! Get over here!" It was Evan, his voice laced with worry that momentarily distracted them from their heartache. Quinlan's heart raced as he jumped to attention, pulling away from Fiora's magnetic presence. "What is it?" he called back, an anxious edge creeping into his tone. "Just look." Evan pointed towards the darkening forest. The group had gathered, a ring of anxious faces illuminated by the flickering light of their lantern. Fiora turned, frustration crackling like dry kindling. "This can't keep happening," she snapped, but her urgency took precedence. "We can't let whatever is out there see us like this." As they moved toward the uneasy congregation, the flickering lantern light revealed Jackson, shivering slightly, his control slipping. "I swear I saw something move in the trees," he exclaimed, his eyes wide. "Forest's alive at night," Jude quipped, attempting to sprinkle humor over the mounting tension, but his grin faded as he scanned the darkness. "That's just what it wants you to think." "Great, that's comforting," Jackson shot back, sarcasm nearly dripping from his words as he pushed Aaron, who was trying to share a ghost tale. "Guys, focus," Evan interrupted, his alarm breaking through the banter. "Whatever we stirred up, I don't think it's going to stop." He glanced at Quinlan, eyes locking in a silent moment of shared dread. With a deep breath, Quinlan confronted the whirlpool of emotions still churning inside him. "Then we need to find a way to stop it," he said firmly, though his gut twisted with doubt. Fiora nodded, her earlier frustration morphing into a resolute determination. "We need to work together, share everything we know about spirits, about what we've awakened. It might be too late for some of us, but not for everyone." As they formed a circle, the tension hung in the air, a precarious balance of fear and resolve. The dark horizons stretched beyond their lanterns, a realm of untold threats and hidden truths that waited patiently for their next moves. In that moment, Fiora leaned slightly closer to Quinlan, her presence grounding him. "We'll face it together," she whispered, a quiet promise cloaked in the chaos. But even in that breath of intimacy, an even more considerable fear loomed, the specter of what was to come. Each heartbeat a reminder that the battle for their lives might demand more than they were ready to give. Quinlan felt the weight of her gaze, that connection on the brink of slipping away as the laughter from earlier echoed like a distant memory. "Yeah," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper, "together." But even as they stood armed with determination, the malignancy of their looming threat felt palpable, a dark pulse in the night that knew their every secret. Scene 38. Searching for signs. Quinlan crouched low among the gnarled roots of an ancient oak, frowning at a moss-covered fragment half buried in the earth. "Are we sure this is a good idea?" he asked, brushing aside moist soil. "I mean, we don't know what we're looking for. What if we summon a worse nightmare than we already have?" A chuckle erupted from the nearby underbrush. It was Pastel, her silver hair glinting like a star against the shadows, as she tried to extricate herself from a tangle of brambles. "Relax, Quinny. You're not going to awake an army of malevolent spirits by digging in the dirt." She leaned in more closely, her hazel eyes bright with mischief. "Unless you're just trying to escape my incredible wit." Fiora beckoned them closer, her voice soft yet assertive. "Let's focus, everyone. The last thing we need is a distraction." She clutched the hem of her jacket, a sudden chill in the air causing goosebumps to rise on her arms. This could be important. Her gaze flickered across the dense foliage, seeking signs of the otherworldly being that loomed just at the periphery of their thoughts. As Fiora spoke, the weight of her words seemed to press against Quinlan, drawing memories from the shadows of his heart, a faint echo of laughter, whispers in the dark. He pushed the pain aside, focusing on the grounded presence of his friends. "She's right," he murmured, steadying himself. "We need some kind of artifact or a way to communicate with it. If it wants us dead, maybe it'll listen. Or it'll just take another one of us." Pastel chimed in, a hint of worry creeping into her jocular tone. "It thrives on chaos, after all. Wouldn't surprise me one bit if it enjoys our little scavenger hunt." A sharp intake of breath caught Fiora's attention. She turned to Clara, whose porcelain skin contrasted starkly against the darkening treetops. Clara, typically so composed, was visibly shaken. "What's wrong?" Fiora pressed. "I used to come here as a kid, the stories my dad told me." Clara's voice cracked like brittle twigs underfoot. "They said the forest chose who could enter, that it was a gateway. I never really believed it until now." Her vulnerability, which draped over her like a fragile veil, compelled the others to step closer. "Nothing's going to happen, Clara," Quinlan said, his tone earnest. The protective urge pulsed through him, but not without wanting to draw back his own uncertain feelings. He knelt beside her, matching her gaze. "We're together in this, remember?" "Sure," she nodded slowly, swiping at the moisture forming at the corners of her eyes. "Just don't let it have me." As Pastel pulled a stray yellow flower from a knot of roots, aimlessly twirling it in her fingers, a burst of laughter echoed from the back of their group. It was Theo, regaling John and Lynn with tales of their haunting encounters. "And that's when I discovered that ghost hunters often forgot to check for open windows. Honestly, you'd think they'd have learned something from the previous season too many jump scares." "How do you forget to check a window?" John laughed, clutching his stomach. "That's like forgetting to breathe." "Exactly," Theo shot back, raising his hands exaggeratedly in mock horror. "But what if the ghost had really wanted to escape? It just wanted a good, clean exit and got stuck creeping around like an unwanted houseguest." Fiora smiled at their antics, but her heart pounded. She caught Quinlan's eye, hoping to share in the levity, but found him staring thoughtfully into the trees. Just them, only fleeting moments remained now. "Quinn, Fiora, if we find something here," he interrupted, "it needs to be real. I can't keep pretending that what's going on is just a game." The laughter faded into a tense clarity, As Quinlan spoke, an imperceptible shift rippled through the air. The trees whispered secrets between themselves, emboldening each breath. Pastel noticed first, her voice shifting from jocular to serious. I feel something. Everyone turned toward her, a hushed recognition settling over their faces like a fog. Unlike the laughter just moments earlier, a profound tension hung around them as if the forest were listening, awaiting their next move, their next decision. What do we do next? Clara asked, her voice a fragile thread. Quinlan straightened, a spark of determination igniting within him. We keep looking. We've come this far, haven't we? Together, Fiora added, stepping forward, the warmth of her presence radiating reassurance. Yes, Pastel agreed, the flower now forgotten in her fingers. Together. With unsteady yet resolute hearts, they ventured deeper into the woods, the unseen presence around them, thickening like a storm cloud, whispering frantically against the chaos they were about to unravel. Scene 39, Broken Trust. The frigid air was thick with the acrid scent of dread as Quinlan paced the dimly lit cabin, a ghostly echo of past laughter overshadowing the walls. It felt sterile now, a trap set to ensnare them all. Shadows flickered in the corners, a mosaic of unease, feeding his restless mind. He ran a hand through his tousled hair, the energy ebbing from his playful facade, weighing down his spirit as he recalled the last frantic hour, all the stories, all the camaraderie shattered like glass. Outside, thunder rumbled ominously, as if nature itself recoiled from what had unraveled. Quinlan's heart hammered against his ribs. He could hear Fiora's soft whispers mixed with the uneasy chatter of the others. Fiona's eyes were bright, but the tension in her smile betrayed the uncertainty creeping into their group. She stepped into the living room, her presence electrifying yet haunting. Quinn, do you really think the ghost knows? Fiora's voice, filled with tremors of fear, cut through the taut air. She stood with her arms crossed, a shield against her vulnerability. The pulse of the revelation that the entity was drawn to their fears sliced the air during moments of silence. The creak of the floorboards caught their attention. Jason, his brow drenched in sweat, entered the room. His face was paler than usual, an uneasy look tracing his sharp features. Are we sure it's not one of us? He questioned, avoiding Quinlan's expectant gaze. A room full of secrets became denser, the unspoken suspicions looming with each word. Fiora's eyes widened. What do you mean? Quinlan stepped forward, his stance protective, instinctively brewing an argument in his mind. We're friends, Jason. We trust each other, he asserted, though his voice waned, uncertainty creasing his brow. I don't know, Quinn. When we were in the woods, something was off, and it knew things only we would know. Jason crossed his arms, annoyance bubbling just under the surface. Tommy, sitting against the wall, shoved his hands deep into his jacket pockets. So we're just going to accuse each other now? His voice dripped with sarcasm, but the tremor betrayed the bravado. That's not what I'm saying. Jason snapped. I'm just saying, look, with everything happening, it's worth considering. Fiora stepped between them, her eyes darting back and forth as she desperately sought a resolve. We have to stick together. Whatever out there wants to break us apart, we can't let it. The tension in her voice quelled the brewing storm, yet it lingered, heavy and palpable. As Quinlan stepped closer to Fiora, an unforeseen vulnerability rippled through the air. I can't lose you, Fi. I don't know how to cope if I must face it without you. The admission hung like an echo. Their eyes locked, an unspoken understanding igniting the space between them. Fiora stepped back ever so slightly, chewing her lip. We'll figure this out together, I promise. Her voice softened, laying bare an intimacy that had always simmered under the surface. In that charged moment of proximity, the world around them faded. A warmth enveloped Quinlan as he leaned closer, the frigid air suddenly crackling with electricity. He could feel the ghost of whispers, lost in their own orbit of fear and desire. Slowly, he brushed his fingers against her arm, soft and tentative. Her breath caught, a silent invitation veiled in uncertainty. But just as their hearts beat in unison, the door swung open, crashing against the wall, revealing Moira, her eyes wide with panic. It's back. We need to go, now. The moment shattered like fine china, the air thick with dread. Quinlan could only stare into Fiora's eyes, the connection fracturing beneath the weight of oncoming terror. What do we do? Tommy shouted, hurrying past Moira, glancing back over his shoulder. Outside, the storm raged as the ghostly entity loomed ever closer, its presence a harbinger of their impending doom. "We fight," Quinlan declared, swallowing the fear clawing at his throat. With a nod from Fiora, they fell back on the instincts that had once held them together. But in a shroud of encroaching darkness, the cracks of trust splintered deeper, and the very bonds that had defined them were put to the ultimate test. "We'll need to break the cycle together," Quinlan muttered, though uncertainty lingered in his voice, rendering their next step a step into the void. Scene 40. The unforeseen attack. The frigid wind howled through the trees, rattling the fallen leaves like scattered secrets, while Quinlan turned to Fiora, breaking the stillness of their campfire. "What do you think is scarier, ghosts or the things we hide from each other?" His question hung in the air as patches of smoke from the fire curled upward, filled with hints of roasted marshmallows and stories untold. Fiora wrapped her arms around her knees, her earthy eyes reflecting the dancing flames. The laughter of the group seemed far off, a muted backdrop to the heaviness of their conversation. "Probably what's lurking beneath the surface," she mused, glancing toward the others, who were clumsily stacking wood for another fire. "Like how we pretend our fears don't matter." "Or our failures," interrupted Miles, one of their closest friends, as he threw a piece of crooked bark onto the rising flames. "I mean, the other night I was talking a big game about being a lot better at ghost stories than I actually am. I think the other guys were just too nice to say I've got the storytelling skill of a rock." The group chuckled, but the laughter was strained, edged with something unspoken. Even in laughter, each one felt the weight of vulnerability, emotions they masked with banter. "Maybe we should all share our ghost stories," suggested Lila, her long hair cascading as she readied the next log, her voice buoyant yet fragile. "It could be like the ultimate bonding moment." "Yeah, bonding over ghost stories sounds comforting," Quinlan replied dryly. "Last time it nearly got us killed." Fiora turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You mean when we lost Chloe?" The collective silence punctured the merriment like a dagger. Quinlan winced, the memory clawed at him, his protective nature flaring up. Fiora placed a gentle hand on his forearm, offering solace without words. "It's okay to feel that pain," she urged softly, her voice steady. "That was not your fault." He turned, meeting her gaze. The intensity in her eyes was an uncharted territory filled with understanding and kindness. "What if I had just—" A sudden chill split the night air, a piercing gust snuffing out the crackling fire's warmth. The other friends fell silent, sensing the shift. Laughter faded, and the shadows around them thickened, as if their very fears began to materialize. "Miles, grab the flashlight," Lila said, her voice trembling. "Something feels off." Quinlan's instincts ignited like a live wire. "Stay close," scanning the encroaching darkness beyond their small circle. Each rustling leaf sounded like breathy whispers, a language of dread. Fiora, moving closer, whispered, "What if it's it?" A low growl reverberated from the darkness, a sound unlike anything they had ever encountered. Feelers of cold wrapping around their ankles. A spectral mist began to rise, swirling, thickening. "Now, who's up for a ghost story?" Miles attempted to joke, though his voice wavered. With a sudden flicker, the remaining light of the fire surged violently, flickering erratically. Ghostly fingers clawed at their sanity, and the oppressive air thickened, weighted by dread. A figure emerged, formless yet malleable, an angry canvas of grief and shadow. Quinlan shouted, "Get back!" as he lunged forward, ready to shield Fiora. The being shifted again, and without warning, it lunged at Lila, who let out a horrified scream. A harrowing silence enveloped them, cut only by the unmistakable sound of a heartbeat, a singular pulse of fear thrumming through the group. In the chaos, Quinlan spun back to Fiora, catching her eye. "Whatever happens, we stick together," he promised, his voice both fierce and desperate. "But what if?" Fiora began, her voice trembling. "Don't even think it." He cut her off, pulling her close as the darkness pressed in, tightening around them like a vice. The air grew crackling with energy, the line between life and death blurring around them. This spirit, this unrelenting malevolence had laid bare their souls. Each of them stood on the precipice, hearts racing, longing to scream out for the safety of connection. But the threat loomed, and every glance could be the last. Miles stumbled back, looking fraught. "We have to run now." As the entity chased them, Quinlan grasped Fiora's hand, pulling her along as adrenaline fused them into a single entity fighting to survive. Their shared fears, their closeness, the moments of vulnerability they'd laid bare, their very lives depended on it. "The fire," Fiora yelled. "It's our only chance." But the flames roared, becoming an unwilling ally. Would they stand against the shadows together, or would they be swallowed whole by the fury of the ghost they unwittingly unleashed? What lay ahead was uncharted, unbridled chaos, and they had to confront not just the entity, but their own fears if they ever hoped to escape the night. Scene 41, Emotional Fallout. The wind howled through the trees, a chilling, ghostly lament that settled over the clearing where the group had assembled. Patches of moonlight flickered intermittently through the jagged branches, that illuminating faces etched with confusion and despair. An unsettling stillness cloaked them like a shroud, amplifying the reality of their recent horror bodies lost, promises broken. Quinlan paced aimlessly, his footsteps crunching on the debris-littered ground, a dissonant contrast to their haunted silence. Each step echoed like a rhythmic reminder of the devastation gripping their hearts. Fiora stood in the shadows, her back pressed against the gnarled bark of an ancient oak. She could feel its rough texture under her fingertips, a stark reminder of the life that continued outside their gruesome ordeal. Her chest tightened as she watched Quinlan. The bravado he typically wore like armor had crumbled, leaving the raw edges of grief and anger exposed. Just hours before, they'd been sharing stories by the fire. Now, they were fragmented souls, each dealing with their own ghosts. "Why did I let you go in first?" A voice broke through the quiet, clearly guilt-ridden. It was Josh, his blonde curls tousled and hands trembling as he clenched and unclenched them. His irritation aimed at Quinlan felt all-consuming. "Josh, stop," Fiona interjected, stepping forward. "This isn't helping." But her voice barely sliced through the thick tension. "Didn't help sending Ellen there, did it?" Josh snapped back, his eyes narrowing. "And you were right behind her." The collective atmosphere thickened, sorrow infecting it like a virulent disease. Quinlan's jaw tightened, his fists balled in a reflexive motion. "No one anticipated," Quinlan began, but his voice cracked, betrayed by the very emotion he tried so hard to conceal. Fiona's heart sank as she considered how quickly accusations formed when fear took root in the heart. She grabbed Quinlan's forearm, grounding him. Soon others joined in, the air thick with grief, anger, and unresolved guilt. Clara, her usually bright demeanor now shadowed, stepped closer. "This isn't about blame. We're all struggling. Struggling? Is that what you call it?" Someone shouted from the periphery, and Brianna thrust herself into the fray. "We need answers, not hugs. We should have understood what we were dealing with." Fiora felt her stomach twist at the friction words thrown like daggers, slicing at already raw wounds. "Guys, we have to pull together, or we'll end up like her." Her voice, imbued with fierce determination, turned heads. There was a beat of silence, an acknowledgement of the looming darkness pressing around them. As if in response to their fear, a low rumble echoed from the depths of the woods, making the air vibrate, and a collective shiver ran through the group. With sudden resolve, Fiora turned to Quinlan, searching his gaze for a lifeline amidst the wreckage. "We can't let this tear us apart. We can't." Slowly, Quinlan met her eyes, his expression a mix of vulnerability and determination. "You're right," he said softly. The storm of voices subsiding, the intensity of their shared grief drew them together, creating an unyielding bond. Against the backdrop of their fractured world, Fiora reached up to gently cup his face. The warmth of her palm ignited something deep inside Quinlan, an urge to seek solace, not just for their hearts, but in the inevitable bond that pulled them closer, pushing aside all external chaos. As if time itself paused, they drew nearer, breaths mingling, until her lips brushed against his, gentle at first, hesitant like a whisper, but charged with an electric thread of longing that sizzled through the air. Their surroundings faded, shadows melting into something softer, almost sacred. The kiss deepened, echoing with everything unsaid, their fears, their hopes, their shared pain. But the moment fractured as another loud rustle echoed from the forest, snapping them back to the dark reality surrounding them. Quinlan pulled away, breathless, their connection a fleeting, fragile line in the chaos. "What was that?" Clara exclaimed, scanning the woods anxiously. Fiora's heart raced with dread. They weren't alone. This respite from grief and anger hung like glass, fragile and ready to shatter at the slightest tremor. As they turned, a rustling intensified, and Quinlan instinctively positioned himself between Fiora and the shadows. Determination set in his eyes. We've faced the worst. This isn't over. Not yet. And in that moment, the stakes of the night became chillingly clear. The entity was still watching, still waiting. The fight for survival morphed ominously into an even darker chapter. Scene 42, constructing a barrier. The darkening sky rolled ominously, twin brooding clouds threatening to unleash a deluge upon the skeletal trees surrounding the old cabin. Inside, flickering candlelight cast erratic shadows on the decrepit walls as the group gathered around Aiden, who stood like a general at a war table, marked by urgency and a touch of self-doubt. "Are we really sure this will work?" Fiona said, her brow creased with worry as she fiddled with her long braid, its strands perpetually undone, much like her thoughts. The air was thick with anxiety, the scent of melting wax blending with a hint of damp earth seeping through the cabin's cracks. "Trust me," Aiden replied, his tone steady as he marked a large circle on the floor with chalk. "We need this barrier. It'll keep whatever that thing is at bay." His fingers moved quickly, tracing each line with purpose, but beneath the surface, he exuded an intensity that hinted at a brewing storm within. "Just how do you know this will do anything?" Quinlan interjected, crossing his arms defensively. He leaned against the wall, folding his body into a protective shell while keeping his eyes keenly on Aiden's design. "You've never faced something like this before." Tension crackled in the air like static electricity, and Fiora stood closer, shielding herself against the unknown, her voice soft yet fervent.